What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel and welcome to some more Week 9 preview and predictions. For today, ladies and gentlemen, we are diving on into a couple of ranked versus ranked matchups. We got a lot of them this week. We're going to be previewing all of them, but I got the three biggest ones, in my opinion, here today. Starting out with arguably the biggest game of the weekend. The only two remaining undefeated teams in SEC play will battle it out in Kyle Field in College Station this weekend. The LSU Tigers and the Texas A&M Aggies are set to do battle. A game that usually takes place at the end of the season is moved to Week 9 this year. And we're going to tell you everything you need to know about the Aggies and Tigers here in just a little bit. But before we do that, you guys know I got to say thank you for all the love and support I continue to see, whether it's here on the channel or elsewhere. And please continue to show your support for me in any way you can. I really do appreciate all of it. And thank you for taking time out of your busy day to watch this video, whether that's subscribing here on YouTube if you haven't done so, and you're going to want to if you're as big of a college football nerd as I am, liking, commenting, sharing, or any other way to interact with the channel here on YouTube. That would be greatly appreciated, as well as if you would go give me a follow on Twitter or X, whatever you prefer to call it. It's at TailgateNate29, and I'm posting stuff about articles I write, games I call. I'm going to try to be doing that a lot more often than I have been, so I really appreciate everything that you guys continue to do to support me. And now, without further ado, I won't bore you any longer. Let's dive on in. Again, the only two remaining undefeated teams in SEC conference play. The winner gets sole position atop the SEC, and more importantly, the opportunity to control their own destiny in the road to get to Atlanta. Hey, how do preview predictions work here on my channel? Well, I'm glad you asked. We're going to take a deep dive into the game and sort of talk about some keys when each team possesses the football. So we will first go through keys to the game when LSU is on offense and Texas A&M is on defense, and then we'll flip it. We'll look at the Aggie offense versus the Tiger defense. I'll go ahead and give you sort of my final thoughts, how I think this game is going to play out, as well as a final prediction for who comes away with the very important win from Kyle Field in College Station. Let's dive on in. And first up, we are going to start this one off, again, as I said just a little bit ago, by talking about the LSU offense. Again, if you haven't kept up with LSU at all this year, let me tell you how this offense is run. Garrett Nussmeier has been a phenomenal quarterback so far this season. 2,222 yards, so you got twos across the board there in the passing stat. 18 touchdowns and 6 interceptions for Nussmeier so far this season. And Nussmeier has been a phenomenal passer and has got a lot of really good weapons. Lacey Anderson, Taylor Daniels, the list goes on and on. But I do want to talk about his sort of presence when he is under pressure, because Nussmeier is going to have to be able to manage the pressure of this Aggie defense that has 17 sacks on the year, that has a lot of really, really good talent, and a lot of guys, including Nick Scowerton, who should be able to be thrown back into the starting role here in this game, that is able to get pressure to the quarterback. Scowerton leads the team in sacks with 4.5. You have a couple guys here, such as Turner and Howell, on this team with 2, and then a bunch of guys have at least 1.5 sacks here on the season. A bunch of guys have 1. You have a guy by the name of Shamar Stewart, your leading tackler and linebacker. Torian York is able to provide pressure. Scowerton is the biggest piece there, yes, but it can come from a lot of other places, and that is where Nussmeier has had trouble this season. 6 of the 7 turnovers that the Tigers have given away so far this year have been interceptions thrown by Garrett Nussmeier. When he is under pressure and he has to get the ball out of his hands quicker than he'd like, he makes some mistakes and he throws the ball into traffic, which is exactly what the Aggies are going to want to try to force here in this game. And I'll talk a little bit more about how they can do that later. But it starts out more so talk about how they can do that within their secondary later. They can do that with their defensive front by, well, just doing what I described just literally 30 seconds ago, right? Force Nussmeier to get the ball out of his hands sooner than he wants to, because when he does that, he rushes his thinking, he doesn't make the best decisions, and he throws things into traffic. That's how he's thrown 6 interceptions so far this season. But the other thing you have to highlight with this offense is early on, I mean, yes, Garrett Nussmeier in this past game have been phenomenal, and the offensive line has been simply sensational to couple with that. They've only allowed 2 sacks so far this season and have done a phenomenal job at being able to buy Garrett Nussmeier time to be able to throw the football downfield. And I think that's another reason where LSU could have a slight advantage here in this game. As good as the Aggie defensive front is, at being able to force pressure. It most of the time is not necessarily all that consistent, and having Nick Skowronson gone has been an absolutely huge factor as to maybe this pass rush is not as good as it has been. Skowronson should be back fully healthy, 100%. Not saying that Skowronson hasn't been back, but I don't think he's been fully healthy. He should primarily be back in that starting role this week. I would hope, at least that's just everything that I have read, so on and so forth. LSU, the offensive line is phenomenal. And if Nussmeier is going to want to avoid those turnovers, avoid those throws in the traffic, the offensive front is probably going up against one of, if not their biggest test so far this year. Yeah, they've played South Carolina. Yeah, they've played Ole Miss. Those are two teams that can really get into the backfield. So LSU has faced some really dynamic pass rushes. Again, you could argue that A&M is their biggest test. That's not necessarily what I am sitting here arguing. I'm just saying that you could provide points for that. But LSU has faced teams that can bring a lot of pressure. Again, they did it with South Carolina. They did it against Ole Miss. Both of those were only 3-point wins. So if Texas A&M can force a little bit more pressure than what those teams are able to provide, they're going to have a really good chance. But you have to talk about the X factor within this offense. And overall, as a team, the X factor is this run game. If LSU is able to get its run game going, they might very well be able to find a lot of success against this Aggie defense. If it can't, well, then that's definitely going to be a problem. It's going to be hard to get it going. This defensive front, not only really good at creating pressure, but also good at being able to slow the run game down. But once again, the freshman Caden Durham is that X factor. I think I've pretty much said this in every video where I've covered the LSU Tigers, but it really is a very important point. If Caden Durham, the freshman running back who leads this team in rushing, does not get going, and you have to rely on Garrett Nussmeier's pass, again, that just opens the door for Texas A&M because this secondary is pretty darn good. You take a look at the stats so far this season, and I mean, well, 209 passing yards per game, that's not a bad stat line at all. Its defense as a whole that only allows around 5.5 yards per play, not a bad number in its own right. But you take a look at some of the pieces in this secondary, 30 passes defended, 8 interceptions, including 3 by Marcus Ratcliffe, who has been phenomenal so far this season in the secondary. They can force throws into traffic by, well, just having good coverage, but also letting this defensive front take over, take control. Again, it's going to have to get past a stout LSU defensive front, specifically their tackles. And if Nick Skowronson and this defensive front can solve the Tiger tackles just a couple of times, that could be all Texas A&M needs to be able to pull away with the win in Aggieland. But I'll show you why that might not be as easy of a task as just simply letting your defensive pressure take over. Yes, it's going to help, but Connor Wigman and this offense are going to have to step it up a little bit. Now, first of all, this Texas A&M run game has been phenomenal so far this season. And Le'Veon Moss is one of the best running backs in the SEC up to this point in the season. 6.4 yards per carry, has just about 700 yards rushing on the season, and 8 rushing touchdowns. Amari Daniels is a very nice compliment, and we know Connor Wigman can get outside of the pocket and run. Does not have a rushing touchdown yet this year, but you would figure that that would change, maybe not in this game, but at least at some point so far this season. But you want to take a look at what Connor Wigman has done through the air since he has been back. He was back in that game against Missouri, and okay, he threw for 276 yards. Sure, that's nice and all. No touchdowns, no picks in that one. But, I mean, overall, you want to talk about the performance of Wigman in the Missouri game, really, really good. Where the problem comes in is while he threw for 217 yards, which is actually his second highest total this year because the first 2 games he played, he just didn't really have that high of a total, only 100 yards against Notre Dame, and overall just didn't need to do that much against the McNeese State Cowboys. I believe also got hurt in that game there as well, but he threw for only 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions against a Mississippi State team that has not proved to be very good so far this season. He struggled this past week, at least what you compare Connor Wigman's ceiling to be. Connor Wigman has got to be the stepping up here, and I think the more that Connor Wigman does, the bigger impact he has here on this game. I think the greater chance A&M has to pull this thing out. Connor Wigman, when he gets involved in this offense, it is really, really hard to stop. Not only through Wigman's arm, but with his legs as well. When he gets outside of the pocket and really starts to help out this run game and helps out guys like Moss and Daniels, when you have to factor in the quarterback run of Wigman, it's going to make things much, much harder on this LSU defense. Now, when you talk about this LSU defense, it's been really good in the rush game so far this year. Where it has struggled is its secondary. Now, it has forced 11 turnovers so far this season. But if my knowledge is correct, and I might be flipping these two numbers in my head, which is why I'm not going to say anything until I fact check myself. Okay, I was actually not flipping those numbers. So LSU has forced 11 turnovers so far this season. Great, that's awesome. Only 4 of those have been interceptions. 7 of the 11 turnovers have been fumbles recovered, and LSU has even forced 12 fumbles this season. They've recovered 7 of them. So this is not a secondary that's going to go up and get you a game-changing turnover. It has the talent to do so. It just hasn't proven it can do that so far this year. The more Connor Wigman does, especially, I believe, through the air, and can challenge this LSU secondary, A&M's other running backs like Moss and Daniels, they're going to be able to get their yards. They're going to get their carries. They're good enough to do so. They might be limited more so in this game than in other games, but for the most part, they're going to be able to get their carries, and Wigman should be able to back that up at least once or twice, maybe 3 or 4 times. The more he can do with his arm, the greater success Texas A&M is going to have offensively. But the one thing I didn't mention about this LSU defense that I'll mention now is you think Texas A&M is a really good team at creating pressure, and they are. Again, Nick Scourton in this defensive front do a phenomenal job at being able to bring blitz packages and so on and so forth and other things to the quarterback room. Well, so can the LSU Tigers. They got 24 sacks so far on the season, and one guy by the name of Braden Swinson, who is among the nation's leaders in individual sacks, he's got 7 of them. You want to talk about another guy in the likes of Savion Jones? Yep, he's got 4.5 sacks there as well, and then the rest are kind of distributed throughout this defense. Your leading tackler in Whit Weeks, who is darn near 70 tackles already, by the way, 2.5 sacks on the season. This is a team that loves to get after the quarterback and can live in this backfield, which is dangerous for an Aggie team that loves to live off of their run, right? If LSU is going to be in that backfield time in and time out, well, that's going to be hard for A&M to be able to win this game. The Aggies are the favorite here. All lines and odds are as of recording this video. For this one is going to be the SEC on ABC primetime matchup at night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This should be a really, really fun one. As you see up here, just right over here, these are the final 2 undefeated teams within conference play. This is going to be a really fun one. I can't wait to see how this one plays out, but how I think it's going to play out is I do think that Caden Durham being a little bit of an X factor here, I don't think he's going to find more success than Moss or Daniels on the side of Texas A&M, but I do think that he is going to have a pretty solid impact here in this game. But to me, it's if I trust Connor Wigman to be able to get the ball through the air enough and be able to make enough dynamic plays to help the Aggies win this game. I also give LSU the advantage in the pass rush because this LSU offensive line has been spectacular this year. I do think the Aggies get through at least once here in this game, but I don't think that they're going to have enough of an impact to really be able to slow the LSU offense down enough. I think the LSU defense has enough to be able to slow down what the Aggies want to do, and I don't think Connor Wigman is going to be able to do enough to help his Aggies out in this one. LSU goes on the road and gets a big-time statement win against the Texas A&M Aggies. Garrett Nussmeier will have himself a good game. Caden Durham will do enough to supplement and keep the Aggie defense guessing while this LSU pass rush comes away with a turnover or 2 and a game-changing play to help flip this one, and the Tigers walk away with a massive road win, and they will be on top of the SEC once it's all said and done. Let me know what you guys think about this one in the comment section down below. Remember to play hard but tailgate harder, and I'll see all you guys in the next video. Goodbye.